FYS courses are important and significant because they really epitomize and characterize the broad liberal arts education that we want students to experience at AUCA. Because as a university, by its very name, a university represents the universe of learning. So when students come to AUCA, as they say, at a university, everyone should be able to study everything. And first year seminar, FYS, represents that ideal, that ethos, because in their first year, students will not be taking a class because it's the class that they have to take, for their major program, whether they're studying international comparative politics or business administration or international law. They'll be taking this class in order to broaden their experience, to encounter a much wider range of writers and texts and theories and concepts that have been produced by people from among civilizations over the whole course of recorded history, because as products of civilization, these texts, these ideas, quite often, I'd almost say always, address the kinds of problems that many students, face today, both on an individual and a collective level. We are living through, for example, a very difficult time. This has been a very difficult year, a very hard year individually and collectively. But when we ask students to sit down and spend some time reading and discussing and writing about a text like the ancient Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, thousands of years old, they will encounter someone, Gilgamesh, a powerful king, who suddenly his best friend dies and he doesn't know what to do. Suddenly it's like his whole world has fallen apart, so he goes on this journey, this exploration. In a similar vein, when we read, for example, the teachings of Confucius, students probably won't encounter, Confucius in other classes, but in their class they can see an example of a teacher to whom other people looked for advice on guidance on how am I supposed to behave in this world? What should I aspire to? What kinds of characteristics should I represent? These are timeless questions, and I think they are particularly relevant to our undergraduates, especially in their first year, because a university is a big step in their learning compared with the kinds of schools that they've probably been to before. University is meant to be a challenging place, and particularly in their first year, even though they've come to university with an idea of, well, I want to major in this program because I want to graduate and I want to use my degree to get a job. At the same time, they are also engaged on a journey of exploration about who they are, because at a university, we also place a great emphasis on personal responsibility, of autonomy, of saying you're at university now and there's going to be a lot more expectation of you to ask your own questions, to do your own readings. We're not always going to be there to tell you what the right or the wrong answer is, but we can help you find ways to find out what the right answer is or the wrong answer is, or a good answer or a slightly less good answer, whether it's in the format of a seminar, which is the foundation of first year seminar, where as a group the professor and the students are sitting together. And again, this is part of the challenge that we find ourselves in. The seminar traditionally is based upon students and professor in the same physical space, the classroom, able to sort of look at each other, to talk to each other, to listen to each other, to be able to read each other's body language. We can't do that in the same way. Now that we're online, it is a big challenge, as much for faculty as it is for students, but we can still have this space and this time to be able to talk to each other, to use, the time-honored technique of, the Socratic dialogue, where people are asking questions, people are maybe asking questions back at them, or trying to, provide an answer, but then trying to justify, how they arrived at that answer. And first year seminar really is the space where we help students sharpen their minds in terms of their reading abilities. So we actually go through all these different kinds of texts, philosophical, historical, poetic, novelistic, dramatic, so that they become familiar with different ways of writing, or rather different ways of thinking as represented in writing, so that they are sort of intellectually being exercised. I say, it's quite like, athletes have to do a lot of different kinds of exercises to warm up. They have to do a lot of practice. That's another thing. First year seminar is a place to explore and to practice, because it takes time to develop the skills that collectively we call critical thinking, the ability to read a text, to understand or try to figure out what we think the author means, but then also to figure out what we think about a particular play or a particular novel or a particular short story or a particular, work of philosophy, and then to engage in a series of steps as a process towards developing our own ideas. We want the students not just to replicate what they learn in the classroom. We want the students to expand upon what they encounter in the classroom. And this is what makes, I think, FYS the epitome, the very definition of the liberal arts, because arts themselves are skills that require practice. But the liberal component of it means there are very few limits on the students about how they can respond to texts, to each other, to myself, the teacher. We say, you have a mind, use it, and try to broaden the range of your intellectual experience. Because university is not the end of education. People may think that, well, if I get my bachelor's degree, that's it. Khalas, I'm done. No more education for me. I can use my degree to get a job. A university degree is for life. Education is for life, because education is a lifelong process. Students may not comprehend fully what they're being asked to read and to write about in first year seminar, and it is a very difficult range of text. That, as I said, it's university. It should be challenging, but it should also be rewarding to spend, a whole year, a course in the fall, a course in the spring, to read, the ancient epic of Gilgamesh, or to read the Analects of Confucius, or to read a series of lectures by Virginia Woolf, or to read a play by Aristophanes, or to read about, or to read Svetlana Alexievich's accounts of, Soviet women who'd fought in the Great Patriotic War. Students may not receive them straight away, but as I was saying, an education is for life. They may not see or fully understand the use or the value or the interests of some of these texts or ideas now, but we're giving them something that they may not realize it until much later, in their lives, maybe even after they've left university, that, when they were reading, for example, the Meditations of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who was writing about, from his very privileged position as a Roman emperor, but just about, the difficulties we face in our everyday life. Yes, there are huge differences between a Roman emperor of the 2nd century AD and, a first-year student at AUCA, but still, I face problems in my life. How do I deal with them? How do I cope with the world around me? Because another thing that I've encountered, and I say this as someone who has I had a very specialized education with finishing with my PhD. I'm nominally an expert in medieval Central Asian poetry, but I've ended up, teaching FYS, and I like it a lot precisely because of the challenges, as much for me as for the students, of trying to figure out what are some of the similarities and connections between all these different texts. Well, the one main connection is that they were written and created by people, and that irrespective of whether it's the Bhagavad Gita from India or, Christine de Pizan writing in medieval Europe, or someone like Frantz Fanon writing about Africa and post-colonialism in the 20th century, ultimately they are all trying to deal with what does it mean to be human? Who am I? That's the question we often ask, particularly in the fall semester. Who am I? What does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be a person? And then the next semester, we'll broaden that question to who are we? Because the question of who am I cannot be separated out from the wider sense of community. Confucius speaks a lot about the individual self being rooted in the family. Now, people also may strongly disagree with his concept of filial piety, the idea that essentially sons and daughters have to behave in a kind of deferential manner to their parents, because that is the model of how a citizen is supposed to behave towards the state. And if students disagree, that's great, because we're not saying to students you have to like what we ask you to read in first year seminar. We're not even asking you to agree with some of the ideas and concepts, but for yourselves, you have to figure out why you don't like a particular writer or an author, or why you disagree with them, and then to be able to demonstrate in a series of logical steps why your disagreement or your dislike is valid and worthwhile. What inspires me most as a professor? The students. It always comes back to the students. I love being in a classroom with students, and that's why I particularly like the seminar format of not just first year seminar, but any upper level class, because I don't want it, a good learning experience is a conversation. I want students to respond to the text, to put forward their own ideas, and to respond to me as well. My best moments in a classroom are when a student will come up with some kind of idea or conclusion about a text, and suddenly my mind will just be like, I don't know what to say. I'll just be like, yes, that is amazing, or that's really good. I've never thought of Frantz Fanon like this, or I've never thought about Aristophanes in this way. This is new to me, and I want to hold on to this. Because, a university, as I said, is a place where we should be giving students agency to think for themselves, to write for themselves, to talk in their own voices with confidence, knowing that when they do so, they're not going to be shut down. If anything else, we're going to encourage them, to say more. And that's what I love about, a university, working as a professor in a university, in teaching. It's the dynamic of the conversation where when it goes really well, I am also learning alongside the students, because what then happens is, particularly because with first year seminar, quite often we'll be teaching some of the same texts or the same kinds of texts each year, because as teachers we can only get better if we work with the same kinds of materials. But that if I have an aha moment one year, one semester, I will hold on to that, and that will actually inform and feed into my own teaching when I come to working with the next group of students. So my own mind, my own range of critical thinking skills has been improved, because that is also a great way to empower the students, to give them confidence that I thought I had an idea, I believed it was valid, I demonstrated that it was valid, that it was logical, that it was worthwhile, and it affected the professor and the rest of the students. Because, again, talking about how a university education, any education doesn't finish with university, they should leave university not just with a degree in one hand, but they should be leaving university with a mind that has been enriched, that has been broadened. They should be leaving with an improved set of skills: thinking, writing, speaking, researching, that they can then go on to use in the rest of their lives. And the way I always think about it is that I often say to students, I don't want you to be like me. I don't want you to be another version of me. I want you to be a better version of yourselves. Which then comes back to this fundamental question that we always ask in something like FYS, well, who am I? How did people in the past address this question of who am I? The Socratic method, this sort of discourse-based method of teaching asks its participants to engage in a lot of self-reflection. What do I believe? What do I think I know? Where did this knowledge come from? Where did this belief come from? Just because I believe something today, is there a possibility that I might not believe it tomorrow if someone comes up to me and, changes my mind? And that's what I really love about teaching in a university, particularly in a scenario of a discussion-based class, but also with a lot of, writing involved as well, because not all students are quite shy. They're a little fearful when they're a little scared when they come to university, because they're uncertain about themselves, and they look to us as the professors as, well, that's the person who knows about this subject, so I'm always just going to listen to them. But giving students a few minutes, for example, as I do in the classroom, just to write their ideas first, sort of helps them break past, the shyness, the uncertainty barrier. And that's also a thing that I love about teaching. What inspires me is seeing how a student will mature and develop and change, not just over the whole course of 4 years, even just one semester. I've had students here or in the past, who've come into a classroom very shy and quiet, but because we've given them the time and the space to express their ideas, not to sort of, slap them down like that, they've actually grown and developed. Every freshman who comes into AUCA, they have to go through this process of this class academic orientation. One of the foundational texts they read there is Immanuel Kant, what is enlightenment. Forgive me if I'm not quoting properly. He says the definition of enlightenment is the ability to think for oneself without being influenced by other people. And that's what I love about teaching, is seeing students not looking to me for the right answer, but looking inside themselves up here for the right answer.